welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me as always are my fabulous co-hosts.
Hello, Rob. It's me, Diana Perry Cruz.
And it's me, Jackie.
Oh, boy.
I wish that's how I always...
It's like with an accent on the end.
Right, Jackie.
Jacques. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
This isn't a podcast about my name.
It's not a podcast about that. It's not
about
a podcast
why I hate something.
but I wish I'd gotten one more cup of coffee before we started recording. No, this is a podcast about behavior analysis and behavior analytic research, where every week we pick a topic and discuss it at length. And this week, it's just like those weeks. And we're going to be discussing a topic that has long been part of the canon of ABA Inside Track. So for folks who listen to every single episode and they pick up all the plot threads we throw down, you know, this is going to answer some of those questions. It's not a season finale, but like it might as well be with just the epic reveals that are going to come out.
All the way back to our other early catchphrase, which was Jackie doesn't have any children.
That's
but then
right.
that changed.
It did, because then, whoops,
Yeah.
I had one.
Yeah.
That was a real
we
twist.
had to stop using that one, but this one has stuck around.
Because I still hate DROs.
Yep.
Yep. And that is the title of the episode, Why Jackie Hates DRO. We should put an S on that. Why Jackie hates DROs. No, just DRO in general?
Yeah.
Okay. So she hates the concept. She doesn't just hate like your DRO or my DRO, just all of them.
I know. Put a caveat. I don't always hate the DRO. There are some instances where the DRO treatment may be effective and be useful, but for the most part, I would say people are using them as Band-Aids. And we'll talk about why.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to reduce behavior quickly by whatever means necessary because it is unsafe. And so in those situations, more can fly. But conceptually, theoretically, the DRO is not great practice.
It's not great practice, and it is used everywhere, all the time, for all behaviors. And it is... I hate it so much, I think.
Oh, no.
Because...
She's getting really red.
I'm getting red. It's hot in here because it is August. But also I'm getting red because I have been teaching now for, like getting
a long
around
time.
12 something years, right? And I did clinical work before that because I'm an old lady. But the things that my students say that they're doing with their clients makes me want to yell and scream and be like, what the swear word are you doing?
Because it's always
Because it's
DRO.
Because it's always a DRO, and I feel it's literally like someone's like, oh, let's slap a DRO on it.
Right.
And that makes me angry because that is not our science. Our science isn't just using one treatment for every single client, every single behavior, and thinking that's enough, because it is not. It's not even bare minimum.
And it's not required to be function-based to be a DRO. It can be function-based.
Yeah, absolutely.
But often it's not being applied in that way.
Yeah. And it's really hard to make it function-based as well, since it's the absence.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and luckily, since Jackie is a good scientist and a good behavior analyst, she has an opinion based on the research and practice, but she's willing to read more articles on it, and perhaps at the end, twist, she'll love DROs.
I won't.
Except we already read these articles, so we know that that's not the twist. But we want to keep you listening, so maybe it will be.
But what I can say is I used to be adamantly against all DROs in my early career. And now I have listened and I've read and I understand that there are times when DROs may be appropriate, but it's rare.
Okay. So we have 3 articles we will be discussing to get into the DRO question and to get a little bit more at why DROs are not usually going to be worth your time.
Yeah, but I also want to say these articles are great.
Oh,
They're
yes.
so thorough.
I mean...
And so I don't hate these articles. I love these articles.
So if I made a DRO t-shirt, you wouldn't necessarily hate it because it's not a DRO.
Right.
And if it's an article about DRO, you'll really be into it.
Yeah.
But if it's the actual DRO program...
And it's run in a way that you could do better. Yes, that's when I hate it.
And
So I just
more
wanna
often than not could do better.
I just want to make the caveat because these authors have done an amazing job.
Oh, yeah.
Like they are thorough. In one article in particular, I'm probably going to use it as an example of the gold standard and how you should do IOA and treatment integrity. Ooh. So I just just want to say that before you say the articles. I don't hate these articles.
You weren't so angry that you threw the articles back in our face and said, I won't even read these.
No, and you think DRO is like easy, right? Because it's easy to implement, but it is not easy conceptually. Yeah. Exactly. So like the minute you start getting into this research, you've doved headfirst. Is doved right? That seems wrong.
Dived
or dove.
Just dove
headfirst into the weeds. And so that's where we will begin and end with the following articles. Other Behavior in the DRO, The Roles of Extinction and Reinforcement by Hangen, Romero, Neidert, and Borrero. That was published in JABA 2020. Analysis of the Reinforcement and Extinction Components in DRO Contingencies with Self-Injury by Mazalesik, Iwata, Vollmer, Zarcone, and Smith. And that was in JABA 1993. And finally, Omission training results in more resurgence than alternative reinforcement by Romano and St. Peter. That was in the Psychological Record 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's start off by talking about what DRO is and sort of where it came from. And some of this is certainly going to be pulling from our own, knowledge of the field, but also a little bit of history in the Mazalesik article, which is the one we're going to start with as well. So we'll kind of kick into that. And I know some of the other articles
year was 1993.
Some history.
Crisscross will make you jump.
So as the professors...
Pump up the jam, pump it
Yeah, let's take it back.
Sorry. That's
what's the 90s song that you sang to let everyone know?
This is how we do it.
See, I would say you'd want to play like Nirvana. You'd be like, oh, it's clearly the 90s.
You're right. All of these are correct.
All of these, we've done it. We've set the stage for the 90s when DRO research was the hot, cool thing. So professors, who would like to do what is DRO? Like your students raise their hand and say, ooh, call on me.
I will. So a DRO means differential reinforcement of other behavior. So in order to implement a DRO correctly, you would provide reinforcement at a specific interval that was pre-assigned. Even if it's a variable DRO, you've pre-assigned that, which I also want to put that clinically is done incorrectly. They're like, just do it whenever, which is not helpful. You provide reinforcement for the absence of the behavior. Mm-hmm. And so a DRO can be, in that interval, can be something called a resetting DRO or a non-resetting DRO. And so the resetting DRO means that when the behavior occurs during that interval, the interval resets, and then the participant has the opportunity to complete that interval in the absence of behavior in order to receive reinforcement, right? The non-resetting DRO interval is the behavior, if the behavior occurs during the interval finishes, and then you have to do the whole entire interval again without the whatever behavior you're looking for in order for reinforcement to occur. Mm-hmm. So, big caveat here. When you're doing DRO, you do not specify the behavior that you are reinforcing. Right? So that is big. Because I hear people like, I'm using a DRO and then I provide it for whatever. No, that's not a DRO.
Then that's not a DRO.
Right? That's not a DRO.
It's a DRA.
Right. So a DRO is just the absence of the target behavior.
Right. So if you're trying to reduce kicking and you put in a DRO for kicking, then at the moment of the reinforcement, the person could be spitting and they still get the reinforcer because they're not kicking.
Right. So people love DROs because they're easy to implement, right? It's just looking for the absence of behavior. But they are frequently not implemented correctly because of that adventitious reinforcement that typically will occur when at that interval, the participant's engaging in an undesirable behavior, and then people won't provide the reinforcer, right? So then it ruins the technological procedures of the DRO. So it's like...
So in situations like that, nothing is actually...
Nothing.
Then your choices are not implement the DRO with fidelity or potentially adventitiously reinforce other behavior.
Right?
Neither, which is great.
No. Okay. And so the reason why I hate the DRO...
Here it comes.
Oh, wait. Actually, one more thing. Okay. DROs can... Another reason why I don't like DROs is because we don't actually know procedurally why they work. Right? So there's 4 things that could be conceptualized when they work. So one of the things that could be acting as an abolishing operation, right? Because you're delivering the reinforcement, absence of the target behavior. So the reinforcement's provided, so the target behavior doesn't have to be evaded, right? So that could be
so
one
like
reason.
an NCR.
Yes, right? That seems like a better idea, though. Okay. So number 2, it could also function as punishment in the terms of negative punishment, right? Because you are making sure the behavior decreases in the future by removing like a response class. So that could happen. It also could be a function of extinction because you're breaking the response reinforcer relation. It also could be advantageous reinforcement of other behavior, right? Because you are providing a reinforcement contingent on nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
But you're always doing something.
But you're always doing something. Right? So I think that's the problematic part. So those are the 4 reasons why it could work. Everyone argues about which one it is. I honestly think that it's going to be situation specific.
Probably.
Right? Because that's how research works in behavior analysis. It's always like idiosyncratic.
Yeah.
And can we ever really know? No, to be honest. But the fact that DRO is called a reinforcement procedure when it actually is more likely an extinction or punishment procedure is problematic for me. Right? Because agencies will claim that they only use reinforcement-based procedures, are using DROs, and then they are
It would be very hard, I think, to practically demonstrate, look, this DRO is functioning as a reinforcement procedure.
You
really can't separate all of these
You
things
can't separate it out.
So probably like DRO plus some DRA, in which case you're like, well, I'm just use the DRA.
Yeah. So and we do know that in most differential reinforcement procedures, extinction is almost always a critical component. Sometimes it doesn't have to be, but usually it is an important component there. So it's very likely that that's a component here.
Right. And so that's one reason that I feel the name itself isn't really correct. And so when people say that they're using it and they're only doing reinforcement-based procedures, they're actually kind of lying to people, right? The second thing I hate is that we as behavior analysts, our job is to teach skills. That should be our first job. Our second job should be decrease problem behavior. Our first job should be teach skills. And I think using the DRO negates that. And I think as behavior analysts, we have moved away from teaching skills for first and foremost and just have focused on problem behavior. And then the skills come as like a byproduct, like, oh, we're going to reduce this problem behavior by teaching these skills. It should be the other way around. We should be reclaiming that we are skill-based teachers. Right? And because we've taught those skills, problem behavior decreases.
Yes.
Reclaim it, Jackie.
Reclaim it. I'm going to make a shirt. Reclaim skill-based teachers. And so I think when we use the DRO, we don't have the opportunity because with the DRO, you're not teaching anything, right? You're just targeting this behavior. And if you're using a DRO and not doing a great job other places, you're really doing a disservice to this client, right? And so if you're teaching other skills, don't use a DRO.
I'll be honest, most of the times when I've seen DROs be effective, there's so many other pieces going on that you sort of have to ask yourself. And sometimes we do, and sometimes we're like, everything seems to be working. What a great package intervention. But part of that package is, looking at parsimony of, do I need some of these pieces? And a lot of times with DRO, it's like, well, no, we also were reinforcing correct responding to some tasks. We were doing lots of social praise for social bids. And then the DRO was there.
Right. And I think the more complex...
You were there too.
Yeah. The more complex we make our treatments, the harder they are to implement. And I think when I've seen DROs be used in a treatment package, people think that the DRO is the sole reason that behavior is decreasing, when likely it's something else. And that's what I see with my students. Like they come in, if they're at an agency that are heavily DRO users, which, oh my goodness, they're like,
Get off your chest, call them out. Put them on blast.
I'm not going to call them out.
The following place is the worst.
No, I'm just saying, like, I think...
No, we work with very good agencies.
We do. We work with great agencies, but I think sometimes ease replaces quality. Treatment packages when the DRO is the sole treatment package, right? So I just want to say that. And everybody knows it because I am not keeping this a quiet thing. Like, I will tell everyone when they talk about a DRO.
And that's why we named the episode.
Why I hate DROs.
Wasn't a surprise.
This is not a surprise. If a supervisor who I'm doing consultation with has a DRO, I will grill them onto the reasoning for the DRO and why they're not doing something else. And
she will do this.
I do this. So
well, what if they listen to this episode and then they'll have a lot of great answers? Actually, they'll probably say, oh, okay, I don't want to do DRO so much.
Yeah. Or, okay, here are the rationale. Like, and in some instances, yes, the DRO has been very helpful, right? This is one way that you can decrease problem behavior without using positive punishment.
It does something.
It does something, right?
Sometimes.
But we just don't know how and why. And I think it's used as a crutch. So that's what I want to say about the DRO.
Okay. So now we know what the DRO is. Let's talk a little bit more about where it came from and some of these mechanisms behind the DRO usage. So we're going to start by talking about the Mazalesik et al. Back from the 90s. And this is specifically looking at DRO in the context of treatment of self-injurious behavior. So again, we'll have some translational research articles that try to get a little bit more into general, all types of human behavior. So some of this is going to be a little specific, though I think it points to the same areas of weakness and understanding that that we've already mentioned about the DRO. So at the time in the 90s, DRO was a very popular treatment. It was first described by Reynolds in non-human experiments in 1961, I should say. And then the first application in human behavior was studied by Allen and Harris in 1966. And as I wrote in my notes, like cocaine and Transformers, it was very popular in the 80s. Those are the two things that were most popular. Cocaine, Transformers, and DROs. Top three. You gotta watch that I Love the 80s show. They mentioned they did a whole bit about it.
He-Man lunchboxes.
Oh, yeah. Paul Scheer was there. He's like, DROs, we're everywhere. Anywho.
No one remembers what you're talking about.
No one remembers I Love the 80s?
No.
No one remembers the 80s? Oh, my. So again, this is something that even though it's been around for a while, even back in the 90s, there was a question of what's really going on here. And there were even studies back, there's a Fox and Azrin study in 73, where there was a comparison of non-contingent attention, punishment, and overcorrection to reduce mouthing behavior and DRO. And DRO came out kind of the worst in terms of effectiveness levels. But, again, back in the 70s, they just started to sort of look at DRO in human populations as a behavioral treatment. And so the real question became, okay, but what's up with this DRO? Why are we using it? Why does it work sometimes? Why does it sometimes not work? And there are a whole bunch of research questions that came up in this article. This is one of the few articles where there are 2 experiments, and I actually am not mad at it for having multiple experiments in one article.
You hate
I know.
that.
Talking about things I don't love from the 90s, I feel like every 90s article had multiple experiments within them. And they all used weird, like there was a narrative style, which I really liked in terms of reading. It was like the story of the data, but man, did it make some of those 90s articles really long to read. So the questions at play are going to be things like, all right, well, when DRO is being used, do you need to know the function of the problem behavior, and do you need to have matched reinforcement? Or maybe you don't. And like you were mentioning, Jackie, is the extinction needed? Or could we just, like with the other procedures, we have this, reinforcement can be freely available for the problem behavior, but the competition of reinforcement for the other, is that good enough, right? So a lot of questions here. Is it that we don't have enough stimuli being used as reinforcers and there's like a satiation effect? So a lot of questions going on here. And there's a lot of solutions. If the issue is, okay, we don't have a matched function in reinforcement, well, hey, Iwata's involved in this paper. We're going to get better FAs. That wasn't as big a thing in the 70s. What about preference assessments? Again, preference assessment technology had come a long way into the 80s and into the 90s at the time of this writing. Competing items assessment, same thing. We're using more stimuli in general, right? You get that from a preference assessment. But again, even if you answer all these questions, you still have to ask, what does DRO do? How does it work? Which again, as we talked about, the DRO, everyone uses them. Everyone thinks it's the easiest of the DR, of the differential reinforcement procedures. Yet the other ones, we know why they work. DRO is sort of this black box of like, I don't know, other, right? For other reasons.
Yeah, check the other box.
So here in the research, they said, let's look at reinforcement components of DROs in treatment for decreasing rates of self-injurious behavior. And that research quickly petered out and didn't go anywhere. So they said, all right, let's look at DRO with and without extinction. Let's also look at the preferences or non-preferences of reinforcers used in DRO. And from this, let's get a sense of what are the active mechanisms, the active ingredient, let's say, in a DRO procedure. So again, I usually hate when they have 2 experiments, but I love this first one because it pretty much was just doing a reinforcer assessment and then a PACE procedure. And they're like, ta-da, reinforcement assessment worked. And PACE procedure identified the items correctly. So hooray, they kind of replicated PACE procedure. Very cute. That's the whole experiment. I thought it was very funny. The participants will be the same throughout this study. It's 3 women in a state residential facility that had a history of SIB. They had intellectual impairment. They'd previously done a study using functional analysis methodology to find the function of self-injurious behavior. For all 3, it was SIB maintained by access to attention. So that's going to be the matched reinforcer throughout this study. And they successfully were able to identify the most preferred items through an approach response. So they had a list of preferred and non-preferred items. They did a reinforcer assessment to, identify this to be so. And that's the first experiment. Let's get into the second one, which is actually the one that matters for our episode. So in here, they looked at responses per minute of SIB, which, again, different topography is like headbanging, face hitting for the different participants. And they just sort of did a series of DRO conditions, and they varied how much or little extinction and how much or little matched or non-matched reinforcement or reinforcement for problem behavior existed within a number of sort of little mini experiments. So each participant had multiple reversals within, and each participant sort of had a different trajectory of DRO procedures, which, again, not necessarily the strongest of experimental designs in some ways, but I think kind of tells the story very nicely of this question of what's up with DRO. So we'll start with Diane, who only had 2 conditions tested. There was a reinforcement attention condition, which was pretty much like a baseline in the baseline condition. So it's pretty much run like an attention condition in an FA, where for the occurrence of SIB, she'd receive 5 seconds of contingent attention, like stop hitting yourself kind of, hey, put your hands down kind of stuff. Then, after they'd established their baseline rates of SIB, they moved to a DRO with music plus extinction condition, in which, if there was no SIB for 15 seconds, Diane would receive 5 seconds of music, which was her highest preference item. And if SIB occurred, they would reset the interval, but no attention was delivered for SIB. There's your extinction component. Again, the goal here was, what if we used an arbitrary reinforcer and extinction to all reinforcement related to SIB, whether it's arbitrary or relevant reinforcers?
Do you think it was Nirvana?
In 1993, when this was written?
No, because it was, yeah.
Nevermind came out in 1991, so it is possible Diane was listening to Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Yeah, okay.
It is definitely possible. So the results for this little mini study in the bigger study was what you'd expect: variable and high rates of SIB when it was reinforced with attention, which was the maintaining variable for SIB, with a rapid decrease to like 0.5 responses per minute during that first treatment, in which the DRO with an arbitrary reinforcer and extinction was in place. Return to baseline, you see what you'd expect in a return to baseline when you're doing a reversal design, in which there's a purpose to the treatment, and that rates went right back up. And then when you returned to treatment, returned to a low level, even lower this time, 0.1 responses per minute. So again, we saw DRO was very successful, but again, doesn't answer the question. DRO can work, but was it the music reinforcement, or was it the extinction of maintaining attention that was at play?
We'll never know.
No, we will. There's 2 more things, and then we have more studies to talk about. That's the end of the episode. We didn't even make it to 50 minutes. Jackie complained for a while, and I did a third of an article. All right.
Well, that's all the time we have for today.
Everything's idiosyncratic.
So let's move on to Brenda. So again, let's look at what if we change how reinforcement is delivered and we change some of the extinction components. What if we had non-preferred stimuli? What if we just didn't use extinction at all as part of our DRO, right? We could do that. It's the 90s. Within the same reversal design. So again, they did the same baseline, the reinforcement for attention for the occurrence of SIB or following the occurrence of SIB. Then again, they repeated the DRO with music plus extinction, just like they did with Diane. However, the difference here is that Brenda did not ever approach music. So that was not a preferred item.
Brenda liked the Pretenders.
Yeah. So 15 seconds without SIB, she got to listen to music for 5 seconds, which she wouldn't have chosen otherwise. And they did a reset extinction for SIB. They returned to the baseline, the reinforcer attention. Now they said, what if we just did extinction? So no reinforcement for attention. If any SIB, no attention is delivered, right? So it's just extinction. There's no differential reinforcement at all. Then they returned to the DRO music plus reinforcement. Then they did the reversal. Then they moved to a DRO music and reinforcement for attention. So again, something non-preferred if no SIB occurs for 15 seconds. And if you have SIB, we'll deliver attention, which is the maintaining reinforcer. Then they did a reversal back to the extinction attention condition, where again, just SIB behavior is on extinction. Then they said, all right, now let's move on to DRO with just attention. So 15 seconds without SIB, we deliver attention, right? So what happened? Well, again, during baseline, as you'd expect, high rates of SIB, about 10.5 responses per minute. That actually did decrease to 2.1 responses per minute during that first treatment. So what you'd think of as a DRO, even though there was a non-preferred stimuli being presented. So Perhaps she kind of liked music, just not as much as other things, although this was a PACE procedure, so there was no approach. But again, maybe she decided she liked music as the study went on. That Nirvana album really grew on her. Who knows?
How do you approach music, by the way?
It's there, and you got to go forward and press play, I'm assuming.
That's the consummation.
Oh, okay.
Right?
It wasn't just like, is she listening or not?
No.
You just held up a record and hoped that she grabbed at it and said, put this on.
It's tricky though.
Yes.
But yeah, if there's an approach,
there's probably a
response
switch or something to turn
required.
it on.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
I don't believe they described it, but that's what I'm guessing. All right. Then again, return to baseline. We saw an increase in SIB as you'd expect. Then just extinction was in place. And guess what we saw?
What?
Sharp drop in rates of SIB to 1 response per minute, which was similar, but actually better than the DRO contingency in place. So again, maybe it's actually extinction that's really the big player when it comes to DRO. All right, but what if we did DRO music plus reinforcement of attention? Guess what we saw?
I've lost track. I don't know.
Huge increase in SIB to 11.5 responses per minute. So DRO, when you're not removing the maintaining variable, is about as good as nothing.
Gotcha.
Or baseline, I should say, because you're still responding to attention. So clearly music was not a reinforcer here and did not compete as a reinforcer, and extinction does seem to be the functional component of DRO, because when SIB was responded to with no attention, we saw a decrease in SIB. So I don't know, maybe DRO is not really doing that much. It wasn't that condition with DRO in place and extinction wasn't really that much better. It was actually worse in some in quantitative ways, slightly worse than just extinction. All right, but, music was a non-preferred. So what if we used a highly preferred arbitrary reinforcer? So we moved to Bonnie. Again, a pretty similar experiment where we had our reinforcer attention, our baseline condition, just extinction for attention, then a DRO varied condition with reinforcement for attention. So you had 3 stimuli chosen from the pool of preferred items. In each session, you would change one out. So, Bonnie would pick the one that she wanted to have, and again, would receive 5-second access to one of those 3 items in the absence of SIB for 15 seconds, and it would rotate each DRO interval, so just constantly getting to change up those 3 different items in front of her, but attention was still delivered for SIB. Then let's do what a DRO probably should look like in best case, which is varied preferred items delivered if no SIB or no target behavior occurs during the interval with the extinction for attention or the maintaining variable component. And what do we see? Well, again, in baseline, we saw 6.2 responses per minute of self-injurious behavior. With extinction, we saw a decrease to 1.2, which again, we would expect to see. When DRO was in place with the highly preferred items, but attention was still delivered for the SIB, we saw pretty much a return to baseline rate, 7.2 responses per minute. So again, if you have a good DRO, if the reinforcement of DRO is good, but there's no extinction, might as well not do anything, it seems, at least in this study. When they added extinction back in, they saw a drop of SIB responses per minute to 1.2. But again, similar to extinction only. And then after that, they did a bunch of DRAs. They don't talk about it too much in the study to teach participants to request attention, request items, and and that was great. Everyone had a great time.
They ended on a high note.
Yes, they didn't go into that because it wasn't the point of the study, but they did do more. They weren't just like, wow, we learned so much about DRO. Don't know about the
That might be in
a
different study.
Yeah. So they did then provide meaningful treatment for all 3 of the participants here. So I guess it looks like if you want to use DRO, guess what? You better know the function of the behavior, because if you don't, there's a good chance you are running nothing. You are reinforcing the problem behavior and you're providing irrelevant reinforcers for other. And at best, you're just providing extinction. But if you don't know the function, you can't run an extinction procedure. So it does seem like DRO kind of doesn't have anything great going on for it. However, we're going to take a quick break. But when we come back, we do need to ask the question, if you know the function and you can do extinction, is it true that we're not doing any reinforcement at all in a DRO procedure? Is there actually no benefit whatsoever to DRO? And some of our future studies look a little bit more into that using future technology, not of the 90s. We didn't have the technology back then. So after a break, we're going to move into the future to talk a little bit more about what, if anything, DRO accomplishes. We'll be right back.
Hi, do you want to be a BCBA? also known as a board-certified behavior analyst?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Massachusetts to get your graduate degree, just minutes outside of Boston.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education, dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years.
And our 2022 graduates had a 92% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy approved fieldwork placements, ethics mini handbooks, PhD levels professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland if interested.
And don't forget, our program is accredited by the Association of Behavior Analysis International, or ABAI, as a Tier 1 master's degree program.
Don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu.
regiscollege.edu.
One more time, www.regiscollege.edu.
See you there.
Bye.
And we are back talking about DRO, specifically why Jackie hates DRO. But before we continue the discussion and talk a little bit more about what might be going on with DRO, I want to remind all of our listeners that ABA Inside Track is ACE and QABA approved. And by listening, you're able to earn 1 learning CE. All you need to do is listen to the episode, then go to our website, abainsidetrack.com, or click the link in your podcast player. You're going to need to enter in some key information, including 2 secret code words. I'm going to give you the first secret code word right now, and it is cinnamon. CINNAMON. It's a delicious spice that you put on your French toast to make it oh so good.
Yum, yum, yum.
I just like to put it on my regular toast.
Oh, you could put cinnamon anywhere.
Yeah,
just don't eat a spoonful of cinnamon.
Don't do that. I put a little bit in the coffee before we make it sometimes.
That is your
cinnamon.
favorite additive to coffee, I think.
Additive.
Yes, yeah. And then since you reminded me to let everyone know that if I had a girl band, our name would be Cinnamon Sentiment.
Yes, when we were way into the video game Rock Band, Dinah did have her own band that was named Cinnamon Sentiment.
Yeah, that's right. I was the bassist.
Yeah.
I could never.
Cinnamon.
I tried, and then I was like, I'm done.
So while we'll break down that podcast setup. We'll go put up the Rock Band setup right after this. Cinnamon. All right, so we're moving into the future. We've learned that DRO
the distant future, the year 2020,
do much unless you have extinction. So is there any reinforcement at all? Because if there's not, what the heck is the point of DRO? Because it's just an extinction procedure where you're adding reinforcement for who knows what.
What are we doing
Which
here?
there's better ways to do exactly that. It's called the DRA or DRL or DRA. Any other
DRI.
DRI.
DRH.
DRO.
But not DRO. Take it away, Jackie.
All right.
All right. So I'm going to talk about Hangen and colleagues looking at other behavior. I like it that it's in parentheses.
In quotes?
Yeah. Other behavior and the DRO. And so previous studies, it was Jessel and colleagues in 2015, wanted to see what was happening during the DRO condition. And they wanted to see, like, is it extinction? Is it advantageous reinforcement? Mm-hmm. Is it punishment?
Yeah.
Well, what's happening?
Another killer article that is like,
oh my goodness,
very in the weeds.
It's a very, very technical article.
It's a
very well done.
I'm gonna so well done.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to non-technical talk about it with you so that we can get through it in a timely manner. But I could have probably spent an entire hour just talking about this article.
It's not an easy. It's not an easy read in the sense of it was like impossible to read, but there's a lot moving pieces. It's not like human. It's like a more translational study in a lot of ways, so it can be very complicated. So it needs a lot of time.
But this also is one of the studies that if you want to read about amazing IOA and treatment integrity, you read that section. Holy moly, it's so good. They outline why they use the IOA. And the different IOAs that they're using for the different behaviors. So amazing. So, but in the previous study, Jessel in 2015, they were looking at the DRO condition and what was happening during DRO as well as an extinction condition. And they were looking to see if the behavior that they saw an increase of other behavior was due to extinction-induced variability, adaptation reinforcement, or the DRO itself, right? So what they had is they had some college students and they were playing a little video game. So it's obviously contrived, right? And when they put one of the switches on the computer as a DRO, they saw that almost all of the college students reallocated their responding away from the original target response. And they saw an increase in that other behavior. And so they said that they believed that this probably was extinction-induced variability potentially, right? And so maybe that's something that you should be thinking about, that those other behaviors, right, those non-targeted behaviors may increase, and that might be a way that we can conceptually use DRO in a functional way by looking at the non-targeted behaviors and seeing if they're increasing.
Yeah.
Right? But there was a ton of limitations, obviously, because it's a translation study, right? The participants were college students. They wouldn't have experienced a DRO, right? So they probably didn't have a history of a DRO. As a treatment, the delay was really short. The probes were really short. So they didn't have long enough to really experience the conditions. And that's not what actually would have happened.
Yeah.
So the purpose of this study was to replicate and extend that study by conducting another behavior assessment that compared the effects of DRO and extinction. But they're looking at on-target behavior, which is, like the target behavior.
Yeah.
Non-target behavior, which is the other categorical behavior which they want them to do. And then they were also looking at what they called other responses, right? So that's anything else that you could be doing in the environment.
Right.
And I think that as well as they could to operationally define that, but man, is that hard.
When I got to that section, if this were my study, I'm like, everything else they did, no, forget it, scrap it. This is nuts. There's no way we're going to be able to capture this.
And they did a really great job, and we'll talk about that. And they used specifically children diagnosed with intellectual disabilities and 2 children that did not have intellectual disabilities to see, these are people that. These are
increases the generality.
Right. And participants that would most likely experience a DRO, and they're not college students. All right. So the participants were 3 older teenagers, right, 18 to 22, with intellectual disabilities.
Wait, one was 10, I think.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, you're right, 10.
Yeah.
And 2 without, and those 2 without were younger, and they were at the preschool. And so I love that they included assent. It's in a tiny little sentence. But I love that they included it. They also included it in termination criteria. If anyone engaged in any disruptive behavior at all, they terminated the session. So thanks for being caring in your research. In the materials and setting, they talk about the plate in which they're going to provide the reinforcer assessment, the reinforcer, which is an edible. They talk about the data collection computers. They talk about it having and being a research room with 1 memories. And I just love when they're like, and there was a table and 2 chairs.
Right.
Because the one piece in the replication was like, oh my God, we all sat on the floor.
Oh, no, right? Like, I just love that they all put that in there.
I know. My study said at least 1 chair.
Oh,
Sometimes there were 2.
Yeah.
And and it didn't actually affect the results.
Like, what if I do a round table? Like, is that going to mess it up? A nice long rectangle table?
And they also had micro switches. So the micro switches were the target behavior or the non-target behavior. So the data were collected for the edible preference assessment on contact, consumption, expulsion, and no selection. Everything else, they collected data on target responses, which was the micro switch, and that will change, just so you know, on the daily. Okay. So the contingencies change.
Okay.
Then the target other response, which is the other micro switch, right, and that will change. And then reinforcement delivery, which is the therapist behavior, and non-target other responses. And so that was like any other behavior that they were seen to engage in a lot. And for the participants that had intellectual disabilities, they usually use the behaviors that they were admitted for to this hospital inpatient unit. But it's very thorough. I don't think you need to know what all those are. There's a table that you can look at it, but it like verbal behavior, like moving your head, stereotypy, those types of things.
So there's a target response, there's an other response, which is like the target response, but not the target response. And then there's everything else, which they then limited to some extent to typically behaviors that were emitted at a higher rate.
Right. But then they said if a behavior occurred for 2 sessions or more, then they wrote an operational definition and then went back and rescored it.
Yeah.
So they tried to incorporate everything. Go them. I never would have done that. And that's why I'm not a great researcher like them.
I mean, there's always that question of like, in the end, DRO did reinforce. Nose picking, I guess?
Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah, okay.
A concurrent schedule embedded with a reversal design was used to demonstrate the experimental control across the different conditions, which are the fixed ratio condition, the DRO, and the extinction. They also did a color preference assessment. That was the first thing that they did to assess color preference using an MSWO to put the color on the specific microswitches.
They should have called that experiment 1.
I know. And then
That's how you know you're researching a future Java article.
Right.
If you include the color
Right,
references.
yeah. So they chose number 2 and 3, not number 1. And just know that the colors varied across the target response and the non-target response.
Okay.
Then they did an edible preference assessment, a brief choice MSWO. They
Experiment
did
2.
Right? They did this every day to ensure that the reinforcer was the reinforcer was something that they wanted. And then they did a reinforcer assessment because now you truly know that this was a Java-related article because they've done all of it, right? So then the reinforcer assessment was just used to assess whether the behavior was sensitive to the contingencies during that day. So if they could allocate responding to one microswitch and not the other, then they knew, okay, yes, behavior was sensitive to the contingencies, we move forward. If it wasn't, there are 3 participants that it wasn't, they were excluded from the study.
Okay.
So very cool. Now, we've done all the assessments. Every single assessment.
Retired.
And so now they have the 3 conditions, the FR condition, the DRO condition, and the extinction condition. Okay. Right? Mm-hmm. In the FR condition, they used a fixed consecutive response requirement of 5. So they showed the participant which microswitch would evoke the reinforcer after 5 responses. They used the 3-step prompting that everyone uses, right?
Okay.
The hierarchy and all the things. So once you hit 5 consecutively on that microswitch, then reinforcement was delivered. The other microswitch that was in the room did not produce any reinforcers when it was. So that's it. That's the FR condition, right? To establish responding. That's all that did. In the DRO condition, now they wanted to provide reinforcement on the omission of target responding. So whatever responding occurred in the DR condition, now we want the participant to respond away from that target response, right? And they found that they used a resetting fixed interval DRO, and the DRO was found by 50% of the intervals in the FR condition, right? So some of it was really short, so then they did some other little things with it, but that doesn't matter to you. All that matters to you is that they used the previous 3 sessions, looked at it, and then wanted to see if responding would allocate away from the previously targeted microswitch. And then extinction, this seems like the worst condition ever. All behavior was ignored. Right? No microswitch produced any reinforcement, and they stayed in that condition until stability in responding.
Okay.
Cool. So they had some procedural modifications. For Max, they had to disable the sound of the button because he thought it was amazing and was dancing and laughing and only pressing the microswitch button.
Yeah.
So had to take that. And he had such rapid responding that they had to make his FR to 10 because it was too much. Jake, when he was doing the edible assessment, the MSWO did not align with what he was asking for.
Oh, interesting.
But not with the color. The color preferences aligned, but the edible didn't. So they just told him, why don't you ask for what you want?
Just tell me what you want.
Yep. And with Adele, she had to have her sessions separated because then she just started allocating responding regardless of contingencies. It was just batch responding. So for a whole entire session, she would just respond to one microswitch and then the other. But once they separated them by an hour, the contingencies then went to control responding.
Okay. It's nice problem-solving information for us.
Yeah. And then for Opal responded continuously through extinction conditions until they gave her a rule. You can hit the microswitch, but you don't have to.
Okay.
And then
she was the 2-year-old.
She was the young one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then they didn't. Okay. So
but
here,
you don't have to.
You don't have to. And then her behavior conformed the contingency. So
it's like, I'm just trying to do what you want.
What do you want?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So they did an across case analysis. And that's what they looked at the mean proportion of responding during the DRO and extinction condition. And that was compared to the FR conditions, right? So they took one over the other and got a little proportion, and it usually goes from 0 to 1. 0 is weak, 1 is high. Okay? They did that across the entire assessment for each participant. They also looked at the proportion of responding in those conditions for the target other, right? And the non-target responses. So all of the behavior they looked at there. Okay. They also did a contingency strength analysis, and they looked at response conditional probabilities, so that's defined as the frequency of the non-target other responses that occurred within 3 seconds of the reinforcer, but divided by the total frequency of that. So they got that. That's going to be a 0 to 1 again. And then they looked at the reinforcer conditional probability, and that was defined as the number of times a reinforcer was delivered that was not preceded. So they put one over the other, and then they got what is that called?
Proportional.
That condition. They got the strength of the contingency.
Okay.
Right? And so it could go from -1 to 1. And the higher the number, the higher the contingency strength.
Yeah.
And the lower the number, the lower contingency strength.
Okay.
Okay. Whew. So that got scary.
You did it.
But I did it. Yep. Yeah. And so generally, I love the first paragraph. They're like, just so you know, the behavior was sensitive to the contingencies. We don't need to show you that graph. And I'm like, you're right. We don't need to see it. Thank you for telling us. And what they found is that during the FR conditions, you saw higher behavior in the target condition than the non-target and other behaviors. Makes sense.
Yes.
Right? So boom, there we know reinforcements provided. We see more target behavior. So yay. During the DRO condition, there was 2 patterns of responding, which I love how they wrote this. One in which the other behavior was consistently elevated. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And one in which the other behavior was not consistently elevated. When I read that, I'm going to say that verbatim.
One of 2 things occurred.
Right. And so it was idiosyncratic. So sometimes that other behavior was elevated and they responded away, and sometimes they just didn't.
Okay.
Yeah. And then during the extinction condition, 2 patterns of responding occurred. Target other responses decreased to low rates, or they continued to occur. Just love that they wrote that. So that means they didn't extinguish. So they said it's likely in that case that the behavior that's occurring is due to a previous history of reinforcement, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, if you've been engaging in a behavior that's having you come to this inpatient unit, this one small 5-minute session isn't going to decrease the behavior. So the mean proportion of the non-target other responding during extinction was higher for all participants relative to the DRO condition. And they say overall, I'm going to sugarcoat, they say that the DRO procedure suppressed the target response and produced slight but fleeting increasing in the target other response, but it was only fleeting. So it eventually did not persist. And in some conditions, the other behavior was not observed, and that could be because of the shorter sessions, right? So they say that DRA may not always increase the behavior you want, right? So ideally, they wanted the non-targeted behavior to increase, but that always wasn't the case. And some of these other behaviors, right, they were being omitted. And so that's something that you wouldn't want with the DRO, right? Because then you'd be advantageously reinforcing this. So that, I think, they're telling you, a DRO may decrease behavior fleetingly.
You mean increased behavior.
DROs may decrease behavior fleetingly, but you may also be inadvertently increasing behaviors you don't want to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there may be reinforcement in DRO, but it doesn't seem like it's clear for everybody, and it's not necessarily of any real social value to the individual.
Nope.
Okay.
There's reinforcement, and then there's hills.
There's kind of reinforcement there, but you got to dig for it, and who knows, you might, hit a gas line or something.
Might
something
just
bad
hit extinction the whole way.
Yep.
Or some punishment.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so the reinforcement part of DRO is not necessarily so great, it seems. But are there any other things we should be aware
There are
of?
other things that could happen.
What else could happen, Diana?
Actually, yes. We should also note that there are something else that could occur in use and then follow-up of a DRO, and that is resurgence.
I love resurgence.
Do you?
I love talking about resurgence. I really want to do some research on resurgence but I don't have time. But hopefully someday we'll have time because I think it is something that people don't think about a lot. And you see it in clinical practice and you're like, what's happening?
Right?
But it's a documented phenomenon.
Yes. So we should think about it. In case anyone doesn't remember, here's the definition from the Romano and St. Peter article, which I'm going to talk about. Resurgence is the reemergence of previously reinforced behavior following the extinction of a more recently reinforced behavior.
I have a classic example.
Okay.
You are teaching a client how to gain your attention, right? Use the easiest one first. Tap on the shoulder.
Sure.
And you're like, oh my God, hey. And you provide reinforcement all the time for the tap on the shoulder, right? But now you're like, I want it to be a little more complex. So now I'm only going to reinforce. Oh, and before that, they were engaging in some pretty significant aggression to get your attention, right? Because we need that. And so now I want to make it harder. And so now they can only get my attention if they say, excuse me, I want to talk to you, right? Much harder.
Yeah, you really amped it up there.
I had to amp it up. Because now when they tap my shoulder, I ignore them. I put that behavior on extinction.
Yep.
And what's going to happen? Boom, they're going to start engaging in aggression again.
Yes.
Right? That's an example of resurgence.
Exactly.
And you're like, what's happening? That's been gone for so long.
That's what happens. Yes. It came out of nowhere.
That's what people say.
But it didn't, right? It is a documented phenomenon. So just like Jackie said, there's like these 3 phases here. If you're thinking about it from research perspective, the first phase is a baseline phase where there's some target response that's been reinforced in the past. In your example, it's aggression. In phase 2, there's an alternative reinforcement, a behavior that's now being taught in its place, perhaps, and in doing so, you're placing that initial behavior on extinction. So aggression's on extinction, and now tapping the shoulder is the alternative response that's reinforced. And then phase 3 is the extinction phase. So in your example, you're like asking for some like pie in the sky complex answer, but it's likely not going to be produced under those circumstances. And both of the previously learned responses, the aggression and the tap on the shoulder, are under extinction. In that set of conditions, it is most likely that you will see the original response come forward again. So that initial aggression is going to now reemerge. That is resurgence, and it's problematic for the exact reasons we just stated, that you can see dangerous behavior come back. So the way that this is related in the current study that I'm looking at is they wanted to evaluate underneath that phase 2 that I just described, the alternative reinforcement conditions, what if that behavior had been reinforced under either a DRO or a DRA? So what was the procedure by which we put that initially learned target response on extinction and taught something else if it was applicable? And this study, unlike yours, Jackie, this is like the Jessel 2015 version of this, in that it was the translational version, which is, they call that bridge research for a reason, right? So things may have started out in an animal lab, and then they look at it translationally with pretty locked down procedures that are intended to mimic day-to-day contingencies, but it's not there yet. It's not really looking at it clinically. So this study had 6 college students who did a computer game that was intended to, set up this in a controlled fashion. And the arrangement that they used was a computer program where the participants earned points for playing in this game that had these different reinforcement schedules available. There was no backup exchange for the points.
Phew.
The points themselves were just...
You need to write your name on the high score student experiment board?
I don't know.
Basic psychology credit board?
They did get extra credit in their psychology class for participating.
That's why they're doing it.
Yeah, but it's not related to the points. So just to make that clear. And they just went for 1 session, but the session lasted for 2 hours.
Thank you. No thanks.
Boy.
Actually-
And that game was not much of a game.
No, actually it was 125 minutes because it was an hour and then a 5-minute break and then another hour of this game, which I'm now going to describe to you.
They really wanted that extra credit.
Yeah, it was broken into like a bunch of little components. So it was 2-minute components within phases, within sessions, but don't worry too much about all of that. Kind of what you need to know is that there was either a red or a blue background on the screen. Red corresponded to DRA and blue corresponded to DRO. And then there was a black circle that moved around on the screen. And then in some sessions, there was also a white circle that moved around on the screen. That was the game. They had to click the circle, and they did that for 2 hours.
An hour of clicking.
I know. It seems like a really long time, but that was the arrangement. And I don't know, maybe it held your interest because they all did it for the 2 hours. They told us the rate it was moving at, but that didn't really mean anything to me. So I don't know if it was like moving super fast, like you couldn't catch it or what. So in baseline, both the white and the black circles were present, and you got points on an FI 2-second schedule for clicking the black circle. I asked myself the question, were the background colors in place? And then I answered it. They must have been, because they have 2 different data paths in baseline for the DRA and the DRO, but the conditions were the same. And then after that, they moved into phase 2, like I described above, the alternative reinforcement phase. Here in the DRA condition, which was the red background, they had they had the black and the white circles. And now you receive the reinforcer on FI 2-second schedule for clicking on the white circle. Okay. Alternative reinforcement, white circle. In the DRO condition, which was the blue background, it just had the black circle. And in this condition, reinforcement was provided for not clicking on the black circle.
Can you believe they did not do a color preference assessment before this?
They did not.
I know. I'm just kidding. I'm just being a jerk.
Okay. Yeah. So no click on the black circle for 2 seconds produced a reinforcer, a point. All right. And then after that, they moved into phase 3, which was extinction. So here, everything was on extinction, and it looked like baseline. So it had the 2 circles going, right? But nothing produced points. And so this was arranged as an ABC, rotation with 2-minute sessions. They did that 5 times. I think that adds up to 60. And then they took a break or something along those lines. Okay. So if you just look at the graphs, because then they graphed how many points or how many clicks or what have you. To be honest with you, there's you don't see a huge difference here, right? But that's what they wanted. What they wanted to see was, let me back up. What they wanted to see was during the extinction phase, so the phase 3, did they see more attempts to click the black circle in the sessions following exposure to the DRA or following exposure to the DRO condition?
Because that would have been the response that resurged.
Exactly. So they're looking to see, do we see resurgence of black circle clicking more so in DRO versus DRA? To be honest with you, when you look at these graphs, I don't see a huge difference. For some participants, there is one of the extinction sessions where there is a little bit differentiation between the graph, but then the next time they did it, perhaps there wasn't, or vice versa, or for some of them, there really doesn't look to be a ton. So visual inspection of these data isn't maybe giving you the full picture, but you can take a look at the graph to look at it yourself. It's a little bit more of a fine-tuned analysis is really going to be needed than just by the eye inspection. So then they also broke it down to look at cumulative responses over time following the DRA and the DRO condition in that extinction session. And when you look here, now you can see the difference. So now for 5 out of 6 participants, they saw more resurgence of clicking the black circle following the DRO condition than they did the DRA. For the last participant, there was really no difference. They didn't do much responding in either, to be honest. Yes. So if you are worried about resurgence, then, and you should be worried about resurgence, right? Then the DRO it's more likely that you could see resurgence. So in our example, going back to emitting aggression when the tap on the shoulder is no longer reinforced, if the way that you reduce that aggression was via a DRO rather than the DRA, which would be
I'm just saying, I might not be alone in hating the DRO.
Yeah. So, it was easy to find all these articles.
Yeah. Write in, everyone.
Yeah. They did say, we did it in the same order for everyone, so it's possible there's sequence effects. Other researchers said the first component presented in the extinction phase may produce higher resurgence, so there's that to consider. And then they did a bunch of other, it was, a very technical article. Yeah. They evaluated the reinforcer delivery that seemed to be roughly equal across sessions. They talked about the topography of the alternative response was the same, which, when I read an article, I'm like, what would I have brought up as a reviewer? And that's what I thought of. And then it was in the discussion. I was like, yes.
I'm a good reviewer.
That's right. So there's a little bit of confirmation for myself. But yeah, super, super cool study. Something we hadn't talked about yet is the concern regarding resurgence, and you might see more of it with the DRO.
All right. Well, with all that being said, let's move into the dissemination station. All right, Jackie. So we've learned a lot about DROs. We've learned that it's probably the extinction component of DRO that decreases the behavior. It's sort of the active ingredient in DRO. That there might be some reinforcement, but not for everybody, and it's a little unclear what is going to get reinforced. And if you use these procedures and then stop using them, or they stop being effective, or you increase the target response or make some changes, you might see more resurgence than if you use, say, a DRA procedure. You might. Again, it's not quite the same type of experiment as some of our others. So knowing all of this, have you changed your opinion of DRO?
Hot no.
Okay.
Hot take is no. And I would...
No.
Hot no. It's hot in
I'm
here.
going to start using that.
Hot no. I would urge people that if they have started to use a DRO, that is not their end treatment. Right? Like that is not the, I'm doing a great job. Initially, you might be doing a great job, but you got to do more. So...
Yeah, and you may have your DRO in place as part of a larger package, like we've said, right? Like a crisis management package.
Mm-hmm.
I see that sometimes, and I'm not going to knock that because you have to get dangerous behavior under control some way or the other. You don't always have the luxury of, pondering, is it really extinction that's at play here, right? Like that's not the question. The question is, how can we make sure this kid isn't hurting himself? So this is a different discussion than that discussion.
Yeah, this is a discussion of that when people use DROs ubiquitously in all of their treatment programs. Yeah. And that is like the number one treatment of choice.
I was very surprised because I always think of DRO as that sort of like, I got to put something in place. I don't know. DRO usually is okay.
Put a DRO on it.
But the surprise being, looking back at some of the articles we talked about, if you don't know the function of the behavior, so because I always think of DRO as like, well, I don't have time for an FA. I got to do something, a DRO. But if you don't know the function of the behavior, it's a good chance that you're not even, capitalizing on the active ingredient in DRO, which is the extinction piece, because you're just hoping you get lucky in terms of your function.
The active ingredient is other.
But if you're just going to guess and be like, I don't want to do an FA, I'll guess and teach something, you're probably better off just saying, I'll teach all the basic functional communication responses.
Absolutely.
That's probably a better use of your, I don't want to do an FA and I'm just going to make up a treatment plan. Why don't you just do FCT for everything?
You do not need to figure out the function of the challenging behavior to teach all of the basic functional communication skills.
That's what I'm saying. Number one, we're skill teachers.
Yeah.
Number two, we're problem behavior
Everyone
decreasers.
has a right to communicate all of those, whether they happen to have challenging behavior that's maintaining that particular response or not.
So should we really be saying, instead of slap a DRO on it, slap an FCT broad spectrum program on it? If you're going to slap programming,
everyone
that's the better
should be starting with functional communication training if you're finding that your clients do not have a way to communicate their basic needs.
Okay.
Yeah. And very often that will reduce challenging behavior if you are seeing it. Mm-hmm. But guess what? That's not a DRO.
Not a DRO.
No, it is not. So, yeah, I agree with you, Jackie. If DRO actually has all these other caveats and I just needed something quick, to get started, I probably would be focusing on almost any other treatment that I could just say, I'm arbitrarily doing this because at least there's a potential for teaching component. At least we know there's some form of reinforcement. Will it decrease the challenging behavior to the appropriate levels? I don't know. But what's the worst thing that happens when you teach someone how to appropriately communicate for a break or to communicate for your attention? They learn a skill that's important to the accessing reinforcers in their environment. All right, so I guess DRO, I don't know, don't bother. Or whatever. You do you, but you better have a reason you're using DRO and thinking of these things.
Come to it from an informed place.
Yes. And usually your information will be, why am I doing this DRO? It doesn't seem like it's really that useful.
Yes.
All right. Well, now we know the mystery and we have some science beyond it. It's not just Jackie being grumpy about DRO. All right. And let's wrap up the show with pairings.
All right. It's time for pairings. Pairings is the part of the show where I tell you about past episodes you might want to check out if you found this one intriguing. So, we have a whole section on our previous episodes page called The Basics, right? Mm-hmm. So first and foremost, if you liked this and you're like, more of this, please, right? Like, let's get Cooper out and read it together. Then go check out the basics, because there's a lot of good episodes in there where you've had very smart people come on and share their knowledge and expertise with us on some of these like in the weeds topics. So I recommend that. Related specifically to this episode, I've pulled out a few. Episode 125, where we talk about resurgence. Episode 20, where we talked about non-contingent reinforcement. Episode 109, we talked about sensory extinction, which brought up a lot of these same like two sides of the same coin questions. Episode 28, FCT. Episode 86, behavioral momentum with Dr. Bill Ahern. And then episode 249, which Rob named DRA minus extinction equals promising treatment.
I love that.
Yeah. I also like to recommend a snack to go with this episode. And so the snacks for today are sandwiches, cereal, and cold pizza. Can anyone guess what those have in common?
Is it like recent pairings? It's just the food that you fed the kids at some point in the past 24 hours?
It is the foods that do not require me to cook.
Oh.
So if I'm on a DRO for not cooking, this is what you're eating.
Okay.
But they're all really good. I mean, who can argue?
Yeah, I made a killer turkey sandwich with spinach, and you toasted it. It's real good.
Yeah,
it
it's
was rejected
summertime,
by
and
one of two children.
Not really. You got a 50% success right there.
Yeah. All right.
Not cooking in the summer.
One child did not eat.
He wasn't here.
I know.
Yeah, one child was doing something else. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our episode on Why Jackie Hates DRO. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked ABA Inside Track, please subscribe on your podcast player of choice. You can also find us online at abainsidetrack.com, where you can find links to all of the articles we discussed on this episode, as well as links to our previous episodes. You can also subscribe on our Patreon page, patreon.com/ABA Inside Track, where you can get access to all of our episodes ahead of time, access to our polls when those go up. We just had our big year book club poll a little bit ago, but we'll still have listener choice episodes coming out every season. If you subscribe at the $5 and up level, you're able to earn free CEs for listening to our listener choice episodes. We do one of those a season. And at $10 and up, you get access to our book clubs the second they are released, as well as 2 CEs just for being a patron. As a big thank you to us. So again, that's patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. What did I say?
You said it was a thank you to us.
It is a thank you to us, from us to you.
There we go.
And back again.
And scene.
And that's that. You can also email us at abainsidetrack@gmail.com. And before you go, don't forget, if you're interested in CEs, you'll want the second secret code word, and it is Bluebird. 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 It could be one word or 2 words. I actually don't know what it is in science. And in terms of a reference to bluebirds, I remember there's a Shirley Temple movie about a bluebird. Ever remember Shirley Temple movies, right?
Nope.
Only people who are reading studies in the 90s remember Shirley Temple movies. Or that scene in Follow That Bird, starring Big Bird, where he got kidnapped by the circus and he got painted blue. No? Oh, I thought that was a...
Why, does that make you sad?
No, I just never know it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's a classic.
I thought you were, because a lot of people, when they hear that, they're like, oh my God, that was the first time I watched a movie and thought, movies can be sad and traumatic?
Oh, yeah. That one is really sad.
It's rough.
Sadder than Big Bird in China. And Don't Eat the Pictures.
Don't Eat the Pictures. Well, at the end when the little magical Egyptian boy goes back with
Spoilers.
his parents. I'm so sorry. If you can track down a VHS copy of Don't Eat the Pictures, which, spoiler alert, I have a VHS copy of Don't Eat the Pictures, and I kept my TV VCR combo in our attic just in case I want to watch this thing. That's probably on YouTube right now.
It's the only VHS we own.
It's
Don't Eat the Pictures. No.
Yeah, we still have it.
83.
It's a good one. It's probably on YouTube in full. But if you need a VHS, I guess you can come over and borrow mine. But you have to watch it here. You're not walking off with that VHS.
So what was the code word?
Bluebird.
Okay.
Bluebird. And with that, some final thanks. Thanks again to our listeners. Thanks to Dr. Jim Carr for recording our intro, outro music, Kyle Sturia for interstitial music, and Dan Thabit of the Podcast Doctors for his amazing editing work, which hopefully he won't edit out my awesome Don't Eat the Pictures code word riff. Keep that all in, Dan. It's gold.
You can get it on YouTube. I'm watching it right now.
Okay.
Nice.
Well, until next time, we'll be watching Don't Eat the Pictures. But for the rest of you, we'll have another fun-filled episode next week. Until then, keep responding or eating pictures. Bye.